Every monumental shift in video game design history usually begins with a singular, unpolished spark of pure genius. Long before Aperture science became a household name, the foundational physics of portals existed in a completely different universe. In the year 2005, a small group of ambitious students at the DigiPen Institute of Technology attempted to break the laws of digital space. They developed a crude, visually primitive project that they officially titled Narbacular Drop. The core mechanic of this student game was completely unprecedented in the entire interactive entertainment industry. Players could instantly link to entirely separate points in a three-dimensional environment via interconnected gateways. In this primitive world, you played as a captive princess trying to escape an aggressive living dungeon monster. The visual presentation was undeniably rough, utilizing blocky meshes and incredibly low-resolution textures. However, the profound technological wizardry hidden beneath those ugly pixels worked perfectly without a single hitch. Standard video games always forced players to move linearly through continuous, unbroken virtual spaces. Narbacular Drop completely shattered that fundamental rule by letting players rewrite spatial geography on the fly. When you looked through a gateway in this game, you were viewing a real-time rendered window into another location. This was not a simple trick involving hidden loading screens or basic teleportation points. It was a literal, continuous tear in the fabric of the game's simulated reality. The student development team proudly released their innovative creation for free on the internet. For a brief moment it remained an obscure oddity buried deep within indie gaming forums. But true mechanical innovation has a distinct way of drawing the attention of industry giants. Executives at Valve Corporation were actively scouting for fresh, disruptive ideas to expand their creative portfolio. When the student developers sent a gameplay video to Valve, the response from the company was absolutely instantaneous. The brilliant mastermind behind Valve, Gabe Newell, immediately recognized the massive, world-changing potential of their math. The student team was quickly invited to the sleek corporate headquarters in Bellevue, Washington, to conduct a live demonstration. Standing in a room full of legendary industry veterans, the nervous students booted up their fragile prototype. As they demonstrated a physics box falling seamlessly through an infinite spatial loop, the entire room fell dead silent. Gabe Newell did not merely offer them a basic distribution deal on Steam or a modest cash prize for their project. He hired the entire development team on the spot, absorbing them completely into the Valve ecosystem. Their singular directive from that historic day forward was beautifully simple: rebuild their spatial idea from scratch inside the source engine. The rough, medieval fantasy theme of Narbacular Drop was immediately tossed into the garbage bin. Valve needed a narrative framework that could elegantly justify why these bizarre spatial portals existed in the first place. They decided to place this mechanical experiment deep within the existing highly secretive lore of the Half-Life universe. This strategic narrative decision birthed the concept of Aperture Science, a direct bitter corporate rival to Black Mesa. The messy, uncoordinated stone corridors of the student game were systematically replaced by stark, sterile testing environments. The development team now possessed access to world-class physics programmers, professional sound designers, and elite animators. They spent months meticulously refining how the player's momentum would behave when passing through these tiers in reality. The iconic physics tagline of "Speedy Thing Goes In, Speedy Thing Comes Out" was forged during these intense optimization sessions. The clunky magic wand tool from Narbacular Drop was heavily redesigned into a beautiful piece of industrial hardware. This sleek, form-fitting tool would soon be known to millions across the globe as the Aperture Science handheld portal device. Yet despite having a flawless engine and a brilliant tool, the game still lacked a true emotional core. Running through silent, sterile puzzle rooms over and over again quickly began to feel cold and utterly hollow. The development team realized that they desperately required an active force to observe, mock, and guide the player through this geometric gauntlet. As they began testing a sinister, automated voice system to monitor the test chambers, something deeply unsettling woke up within the facility's central mainframe. That awakening inside the mainframe sparked the birth of genetic lifeform and disk operating system known to the world as GLaDOS. Designers quickly realized that this mechanical consciousness could serve a dual purpose within the evolving game loop. Instead of using traditional text tutorials, the team decided to let this cold artificial voice guide the player through the tests. The development phase required radical constraints to ensure the core portal shooting mechanic remained absolutely flawless. To eliminate visual distraction, the environment design was stripped down to an ultra-minimalist aesthetic. Every element in a chamber had to communicate its function instantly without unnecessary decorative clutter. GLaDOS began her interaction with the test subject by offering polite but strangely detached corporate reassurance. Her dialogue initially followed strict safety protocols, masking an underlying clinical coldness. This setup allowed the gameplay to transition seamlessly from basic locomotion to advanced spatial orientation. When the player fired their first orange portal, the fundamental loop of infinite spatial connection locked into place. By limiting the player's tools to just these two interconnected gateways, Valve optimized every single puzzle layout. Momentum became a crucial puzzle mechanic, demanding that players leap from high ledges into floor-mounted portals. They would then fly out of a wall portal with incredible speed, soaring safely across impossible gaps. As the tests progressed, GLaDOS's passive-aggressive statements grew increasingly bizarre and unsettling. She routinely mentioned that the testing protocols might cause permanent psychological or physical distress. This narrative layer served a brilliant mechanical function by driving the player forward out of sheer curiosity. Behind the clean, modular test walls, signs of decay and isolation began to creep into view. Players discovered hidden dens covered in frantic, desperate graffiti left by previous test subjects. The most famous inscription warned future victims of a singular corporate lie regarding a reward. To test emotional detachment, GLaDOS introduced the weighted companion cube for a single, isolated level. She constantly reminded the player that the object was inanimate and absolutely incapable of feeling love. Yet the level concluded with a mandatory instruction to incinerate this silent metallic partner in an industrial furnace. This cruel task solidified the AI as a truly malicious force rather than a simple computer program. Valve's design approach ensured that the game contained absolutely no narrative filler or wasted movement. Automated military turrets were added to introduce a dynamic element of real-time danger into the static spaces. These defense drones spoke in polite, childlike voices even while actively firing upon the test subject. The juxtaposition of cute behavioral design and lethal intent perfectly encapsulated Aperture's corporate culture. As the 19th and final official test chamber reached its end, the illusion of safety dissolved entirely. GLaDOS smoothly announced that the track would deposit the subject into a glorious victory celebration. Refusing to submit to execution, the player had to fire a portal onto a distant wall to escape the track. This iconic moment subverted the entire structure of the game, breaking the player completely out of the test loop. The clean clinical puzzles were replaced by an industrial maze of catwalks, pistons, and hidden machinery. GLaDOS's voice changed immediately, abandoning her polite tone for frantic demands that the player return to the track. Navigating through the complex mechanical backend required applying all the portal skills learned in the clean rooms. Every step brought the player closer to the absolute heart of the machine's central control hub. Stepping inside, the massive form of GLaDOS hung suspended from the ceiling like a mechanical pendulum. She mocked the player's defiance, her central eye tracking every movement with absolute malice. To survive, the player had to systematically detach her personality cores and incinerate them one by one. As the final core dissolved in the furnace, a catastrophic system failure tore the entire room apart. As a violent vortex pulled everything upward into the surface parking lot, a massive mechanical silhouette suddenly loomed over the player's unconscious body. The violent vortex of the upper world fades into pitch blackness as the unconscious test subject is dragged back underground by a robotic claw. Decades dissolve in a state of cryogenic stasis, leaving the sleek, sterile testing tracks of the original game to rot in total isolation. When the sequence finally resumes, players are greeted not by pristine glass walls, but by a sprawling industrial wilderness of rusted iron and wild overgrowth. This dramatic visual shift in Portal 2 serves a critical dual purpose, establishing a grander narrative scale while mirroring the team's expanded mechanical ambitions. Valve faced the monumental challenge of sequel design, needing to evolve a mechanically perfect, self-contained puzzle formula without overcomplicating its elegant core. The solution lay not in altering the portal gun itself, but in fundamentally changing how the environment interacts with the player's momentum. This conceptual breakthrough originated once again from the indie scene, specifically a student project titled TAG, The Power of Paint. Recognizing the brilliant spatial potential of surface-altering liquids, Valve hired the entire student team to integrate their paint mechanics directly into the Portal engine. These liquids evolved into the iconic Aperture Science proprietary gels, introduces as dynamic physics modifiers that completely redefine the geometry of a room. First came the bright blue repulsion gel, a bouncy substance that launches the player high into the air upon impact. Next was the fiery orange propulsion gel, which eliminates all surface friction and causes the player to sprint at terrifying, uncontrollable speeds. Finally, the brilliant white conversion gel turns any non-portable surface into a viable canvas for creating portals. By allowing players to spray these gels through portals, the developers transformed static architecture into a fluid, interactive playground of momentum. The puzzle logic shifted from merely finding paths to actively painting the infrastructure required to traverse them. To ground these retro-futuristic mechanics in the story, the narrative drops players deep into the ancient, forgotten layers of Aperture's past. Here, in the damp salt mines of Michigan, we discover Old Aperture, a graveyard of corporate ambition spanning the 1950s through the 1980s. Through pre-recorded audio messages, players meet Cave Johnson, the eccentric billionaire founder whose unhinged optimism drove the company to financial ruin. This historical descent adds an unexpected layer of tragic comedy, tracing how brilliant spatial innovations were born from reckless, unsafe corporate greed. As the narrative climbs back up through the decades, the environment seamlessly transitions from mid-century wood panels to industrial 1980s plastic. This environmental storytelling is masterfully synchronized with mechanical progression, introducing each gel during its historical era of development. But Valve did not stop at expanding the single-player campaign. They engineered an entirely separate, fully featured cooperative mode. Co-op introduces two brand new robotic test subjects, Atlas and Peabody, each equipped with their own fully functional portal gun. This seemingly simple addition of a second player completely upends the spatial mathematics of the entire game design. Instead of managing just two wormholes, teams must now synchronize 4 separate portals simultaneously, requiring a profound level of coordination. The gameplay shifts from individual spatial deduction to a collaborative exercise in high-stakes communication and inevitable hilarious betrayal. Valve beautifully incentivized this cooperation by designing puzzles that are physically impossible for a single entity to solve alone. One player might act as a structural anchor, maintaining a vital momentum loop, while the other navigates the changing environment in midair. To support this complex interaction without voice chat, developers integrated an intuitive ping system, allowing players to point directly to surfaces. GLaDOS returns as the passive-aggressive puppet master for the co-op campaign, constantly trying to sow seeds of jealousy between the two synthetic partners. Her sharp dialogue praises one robot while subtly insulting the performance of the other, extending the series' dark corporate comedy into multiplayer design. Beyond the gels and co-op, Portal 2 introduces incredible kinetic infrastructure, like excursion funnels and hard-light bridges. Excursion funnels act as tractor beams of swirling blue energy, carrying players and objects smoothly through three-dimensional space. Because these energy fields can be channeled through portals, they allow the player to project physical pathways across otherwise impassable voids. The sheer density of mechanics could easily have overwhelmed the player, but Valve's legendary pacing ensures a perfectly smooth learning curve. Every new element is first isolated in a safe environment, allowing the player to naturally deduce its behavior before it is combined with other systems. By the final act, the game asks you to weave all of these disparate mechanics together into a single breathtaking symphony of momentum and spatial logic. Portal 2 successfully proved that a minimalist mechanical masterpiece could be expanded into a sweeping cinematic blockbuster without losing its pure design soul. The narrative culminates in a desperate high-stakes battle for control over the entire decaying core of the Aperture facility. As the structural integrity of the facility completely collapses, the ceiling suddenly ruptures, exposing the vastness of the starry night sky. With no portable surfaces left inside the room and a malevolent AI pinning the player to the ground, the portal gun is aimed desperately through the roof at the glowing moon itself. The blinding flash of the lunar connection marks the ultimate culmination of a gameplay mechanic stretched to its absolute thematic limit. By pulling the vacuum of space into a terrestrial laboratory, Valve did more than resolve a narrative climax. They solidified a design philosophy that prioritized mechanical purity above all other development considerations. Decades after the release of these titles, the gaming landscape continues to look back at the franchise as a high watermark of interactive storytelling. The core elegance of the series lies in its refusal to include any unnecessary or bloated elements. Modern game design often relies on artificial progression systems, complex skill trees, and endless loops of checklist activities to keep players engaged. In stark contrast, this franchise hands the player their entire mechanical toolkit within the opening minutes of the experience. The dynamic behavior of the environment changes constantly, but the rules governing the player's movement remain entirely absolute. This strict mechanical consistency fosters a profound sense of player agency that few contemporary titles manage to replicate. When you solve a puzzle in this game world, you never feel like you merely tricked an arbitrary line of code. Instead, you feel an immense wave of personal intellectual triumph because you mastered the underlying physics of the universe. The structural pacing of the level design acts as a silent instructor, teaching advanced spatial logic without a single traditional tutorial pop-up. Each individual test chamber introduces a singular new environmental variable, tests your understanding of it, and then combines it with previous elements. This incremental layering ensures that the player's cognitive growth perfectly mirrors the escalating complexity of the facility. Behind this mechanical perfection lurks the unique narrative framing that prevents the gameplay from feeling like a dry academic exercise. The passive-aggressive commentary of the central artificial intelligence serves as both a motivational tool and a brilliant structural pacing mechanism. The sterile, clinical isolation of the testing tracks is constantly juxtaposed against the dark, comedic history of the corporate entity. By exploring the physical layers of the facility, the audience uncovers a corporate evolution built entirely on brilliant madness and institutional arrogance. This environmental storytelling ensures that the setting itself becomes a primary character, breathing life into every cold concrete wall. The franchise proved to the wider industry that a compelling narrative does not require extensive cinematic cutscenes or massive dialogue trees. By weaving the plot directly into the architecture and player actions, the game achieves a rare form of narrative integration. The cooperative campaign further expanded this design ethos by translating spatial puzzles into a masterclass of collective communication. It forced two distinct human minds to synchronize their perspectives, turning four portals into a complex ballet of physics and trust. This structural perfection is precisely why the series has remained practically immune to the passage of time. While other games from the same era suffer from outdated graphical styles or obsolete mechanical trends, these titles feel completely contemporary. Their visual identity is tied directly to an intentional aesthetic of minimalist functionalism and controlled industrial decay. Because the art style serves the clarity of the gameplay mechanics, it never feels unnecessary or dated. In the years since, many puzzle games have attempted to capture the same lightning in a bottle, yet few come close to its flawless execution. They often overcomplicate their design by introducing too many disconnected gimmicks or failing to marry the story with the core interaction. Valve's achievement was knowing exactly when the product was finished and resisting the corporate temptation to dilute the formula. The duology remains a perfectly self-contained artistic statement, possessing a definitive beginning, middle, and end. As the final elevator rises to the surface, leaving the underground complex behind forever, the sense of emotional closure is absolute. Even the parting operatic song from your mechanical tormentor feels like a bizarrely touching badge of honor. It stands as a testament to an era of development where concise scope, narrative confidence, and mechanical polish reigned supreme. The legacy of these games is found not in how many sequels they generated, but in how completely they mastered their own premise. They represent a rare moment in interactive history where every single component aligned to produce an unblemished masterpiece. From a modest student prototype tracking spatial displacement, emerged a cultural touchstone that redefined spatial reasoning. The industry may continue to evolve toward massive open worlds and endless live services, but the brilliance of this concise formula will never fade. It remains a shining beacon of mechanical perfection, a singular journey that challenged our minds while capturing our imaginations completely. In the grand tapestry of digital design, some games merely entertain us, but a rare few change the way we look at space, physics, and the art of play itself.